This Shabbat, we have a very unbalanced Torah, actually, because it's Bereshit. We roll the Torah back to the very beginning, and we read from Genesis. The story of creation and the first humans, Adam and Eve. A lonely God, surrounded by tohu vavohu, the formless, chaotic void, sweeps across the darkness and declares, "Let there be light." Step by step, a world comes into being, water separated from land, celestial bodies, plants, and all kinds of living things to fill the earth, sea, and sky. Even as creation unfolds, something essential is missing: companionship, a presence to share in the wonder and responsibility of this new world. So God addresses God's own loneliness. The human is created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of the divine. God plants a perfect garden and places the human Adam within it, giving him one sacred task: to till and to tend. But Adam, like his creator, is lonely. God says, "Lo tov heyo ha'adam levado." It is not good for a person to be alone. So what does God do? Creates Eve. Loneliness is solved through a divinely arranged marriage. But it's actually kind of depressing because Adam and Eve only get 2 verses of bliss before the snake enters. And we know what happens there, right? Eve is convinced to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and Adam follows, which is probably for the best. Could you imagine a marriage where only one person has moral discernment and the other person doesn't? That would be a disaster. So the newlyweds commit the world's first sin. It all happens very fast. And the rabbis teach that Adam and Eve's creation and their snack at the tree of knowledge all happened before the sun set on their first day of life. Paradise and perfection were incredibly fleeting experiences for the human being. And for millennia, this story of Eve and the snake and the apple or fruit has been used to justify sexism and the oppression of women. The Christian notion of original sin argues that all people are born with Eve's sin, that it's the woman's fault that humanity is doomed and lost paradise. Jewish tradition rejects this idea. That is not a Jewish idea. Instead, we teach that humans are born blameless, but we have free will, which means that our sin is not inherited, but earned. We earn our own sin through our own choices, day by day. But I have to say that even for the rabbis, in all their wisdom, they most often read Eve through a lens of suspicion and male superiority. But what would happen if we stepped back from these readings? What would happen if we asked, what might Eve's action teach us about being human? Maimonides offers one answer. Eve's forbidden snack, though a sin, perhaps was necessary. Maimonides taught that before their eyes were opened, humans had intellect but not discernment. They could think but not yet understand. And only through eating the fruit did humanity gain da'at, moral awareness, the capacity to discern between the good and the corrupt. Eve's so-called disobedience was, in truth, a gift. The first mother bestowed upon all her children the greatest inheritance of all, the ability to make moral choices, to tell the difference between right and wrong, to strive to be good. And with that, bam, the human journey began. No longer perfect, but deeply, beautifully human. Now that could be the end of the sermon, but we all know it's a little more complicated than that. For everything else in the creation story, there's a sort of balance. Heaven and earth, light and darkness, sun and moon, water and dry land. But the human being is unique. We are created alone. And we now may have moral discernment, but we also have free will. And it's hard to know how to choose between right and wrong with a world filled with complexity. And this is our uniquely human problem to solve. Maybe that's why the human is always searching for balance. Because to be human is to live in multiple tensions: pride and humility, reason and compassion, certainty and doubt. Our moral and intellectual complexity sets us apart, and perhaps this is why the rabbis struggled so much to really determine the true nature of our humanity. They asked the question, why were humans created last? And in their differing answers, we see some of their different reasoning. In their argument, one rabbi teaches that humans were created last in the order of creation because we are the crown of creation, the world's guest of honor, arriving only after everything else was prepared for us. But another rabbi insists that we were created last to remind us of our smallness. Even the gnat came before us. So if we became too arrogant, God could just say, remember, even the tiniest creature preceded you. So which is it? Are we the best or are we the least? The most important or the most insignificant? The Torah doesn't resolve it for us. Maybe the truth is that we're supposed to hold a little bit of both. I'm reminded of a favorite Hasidic teaching that says, keep two truths in your pockets and take them out as needed. In one pocket, let it be written, for my sake the world was created. And in the other, I am but dust and ashes. That is the profound lesson of human balance. There are moments when we reach into the first pocket, our moments of joy, accomplishment, awe, and feel as if the whole world was created just for us. Moments like when we fall in love or find a fantastic new job or hold a newborn child. And there are moments where we're going to reach into the other pocket, when we fail, when we hurt someone we love, or simply fall short of our own expectations. When we feel no greater than the dust beneath our feet. Both are true. Both belong to us. The work of being human is to keep both pockets open, to live with the humility of dust and the sacredness of divine purpose at the same time. Maybe that's what Eve discovered when she reached for the fruit. In her sin, she found human purpose. And in discovering her purpose, she confronted the full depth of her existential crisis. She opened both pockets at once. And in that single act, she brought into the world both the knowledge of our greatness and the awareness of our limitations. Eve's gift of moral discernment gave humans the capacity to choose wisely. But making those choices is easier when we are not alone. God, very purposefully, did not create us to be alone. And God did not create us to stay still, and God did not create us to live without responsibility. God created us to grow, to discern, to choose, to connect. When God said it is not good for a person to be alone, it wasn't only a solution to loneliness. It was a solution, an ability to seek balance through these relationships. When we feel worthless, our people can remind us how precious we are. When we grow too self-important, our people can ground us back in our humility and tell us what is what. The mystics of the Zohar describe the first human as two beings joined back to back, male and female, one body, two faces, unable to see one another. So God separated them, not to divide, but instead so that the two people could turn and face each other. Only then they could know love, reciprocity, relationship, the very things that help bring us into balance. We are made from the start to live in relationship. When we are alone, we forget who we are. When we are alone, Eve's gift feels like a burden rather than a superpower. When someone near us is crushed by failure or grief, we can remind them gently, for your sake, the world is created. And when someone grows too certain of their own righteousness, we can help them remember you too are dust and ashes. We balance one another, just as we are balanced by the sacred and the mundane. We are balanced by the divine and by the human, by Eve's wisdom and Adam's awe. Maybe that's the secret of Bereshit, that God's loneliness, human loneliness, Eve's courage, and our constant search for morality, balance, and connection are all parts of the same story. And we are still carrying that work of creation forward. We are trying every day to find balance in a world that so easily spins us out. Eve's gift was not only knowledge, but the invitation to live in the tension, to see both good and evil, joy and sorrow, humility and power, to see that we can choose and see that we have little bits of all of that in us, sometimes simultaneously. Because if Bereshit teaches us anything, it's that we are never meant to be perfect. We are meant to be in process. We are meant to reach towards each other, towards understanding, towards morality, and yes, towards balance. So this Shabbat, as we begin the Torah again, I pray that we find the strength to hold both truths, to live with both pockets open, and know that as we strive for understanding and moral clarity, we are never alone. This Shabbat, let's say thank you to Eve and her snack. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.